if you felt a bit of a nip in the air, it'd be pretty easy to see where it's coming from. Here's your Christmas spot on McFarlane Toys' Twisted Xmas Jack Frost. A chilling sign that winter is on his way. McFarlane Toys' Twisted Xmas Jack Frost stands over 6 inches tall and stands on a base depicting a city with a windmill that Jack is tromping through. Well, Jack was just about to step on that building by his foot. Let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. Now, obviously, this isn't appropriately scaled at just how big this boy would actually be in the wild. I mean, if looking at the buildings alone gauges any bit of size for how big this ice creature stands, he'd be towering even over Godzilla, if you could believe that. Though in a figure, he's only standing about 7.5 inches in height. Once you include, of course, all the additional branches that attach onto the top of his head, or that translates as well to a figure that's 19 centimeters tall. We've already opened a couple of presents under the tree, bringing in some of those other Twisted Xmas figures. The first figure that we had a look at was Santa Claus. Then followed that, we also had a look at his wife. We'll just put her over here. Here's what he looks like as well with Mrs. Claus. And just recently, we also had a look at Frosty the Snowman. What a good, cool bunch of characters. No pun intended, of course, the fact we're going to be looking at Jack Frost. All these figures do bring something a little bit different to the table. Jack Frost just happens to have his size. He also seems to have the most translucent plastic as well. Not only does Jack Frost have the most translucent plastic, but he also has extra things that have to be attached onto the figure when you first get him out of the packaging. Now, this is a long time ago. The first time I had this figure opened up, I first bought it back in 2008. I've looked at this figure a couple of times already on this channel, and through the times, all these little branches have fallen off a couple of times, and I had to put them back in place. Unfortunately, one casualty with Jack Frost in my most recent opening of him from my baggie, it looks like he is missing one thing. All of these branches you may see on the top of his body all have to be attached. They're all by pegs. Most of them are already fully attached. I think from what I remember, there was only just a few of them I had to put in, like this one here, this one here. I have one that's missing actually here on the front. I wanted to actually take this one, which is another one that's removable, but they seem to have very dedicated pegs. So I'll just have to put this one back there and see if I can find the other branch. I mean, good luck. Good luck for me to actually find a branch that size, just laying on the floor, laying inside of a tote. I may have even just ultimately thrown it away, just thinking it was belonging to something else. Missing over only just one little hole right there. I think from what I can see, at least, Jack Frost is complete. He comes basically with 2 parts, not counting all the additional branches that he has on top of his body. But he comes also with this display base. The display base is really interesting because it does put things in perspective of just how big this guy actually is. This was where his foot was lodged in. And if you look to the side, there's tiny little buildings. I did say earlier this guy would tower over Godzilla. I mean, if this was the size of a regular building, for example, Godzilla would only be about the size of that building, maybe just even a tad bit taller. And that's not even coming up to probably the ankle of Jack Frost. Most of the buildings look like they've been frosted over, so I can't even tell if there's any survivors in the city. There's also as well a little skyscraper. It's a little bit of more of a softer plastic that's got bent inside the bag. And in the back, you can also see what's left of it, at least. There's a tiny little windmill. I think the blades were already broken off. I don't think it was something I did. It could have also just been the years of times of putting this guy back in the bag. Because these guys only come out at Christmas time. When they put them on the shelf, they usually sit out for about a month or so, and then they go back into their bags and then back into my totes. So maybe one of the casualties was also the little windmill pieces. But it does also, if it was broken, go really with the rest of the look that they're going with here. Just a frosted over city. It looks like Jack Frost has just plowed his way through whatever civilization was there at one point, and basically he's just continued on his way. Now, when you look at the actual figure, both of his feet, for all intents and purposes, can fit inside that groove, but the one that really is fitting the most is this one here because it has a little indentation. This little ravine right here will actually sit against this bar of plastic, and Jack Frost's feet, literally just, or at least one foot, plugs basically just into that. You can kind of see really how close he got to those buildings. This building right here, which again is only the size of like one little icicle that he has sticking out from his foot, that building was this close to getting destroyed. Although I'm sure they probably would have already frozen inside the buildings long before Jack Frost even totaled them. Jack Frost, though, is a very tall-looking character. I can't even put in perspective like how big this guy would actually be in stories. The details on him is actually really quite good, too. While most of the base is basically just using that same frosted blue plastic that we got already with Mrs. Claus, and then painting, of course, all those little intricate areas there in the white. Jack Frost relies less on that and actually more relies on a translucent blue plastic. The translucency does add more of an ice look to them, and then very nicely they've gone and painted the icicles over top of it. It's always usually the case also that the prototype figures always look better. When you see images of this guy online, especially from McFarlane's site, the figure does look considerably better. Probably just because, again, like they're probably using a little bit more of a matte plastic, and they very carefully went in and painted the pieces. This guy does come across a little more rushed in some of the areas. Like his eyes look really good. You got some nice blue all around the eyes. The eyes are actually more of a metallic red. And then you've got the long teeth or tusks that he has in ice. There are a few little areas where you can kind of just see that they just took the white paint, just brushed it any which way that they could. I mean, it does resonate at least for an icicle snow look for the character, spinning around for the back as well. Like all the icicles look really neat on this guy. The icicles also are using a softer plastic. So if it was one of your concerns, for example, that these could break, just with a little bit of wiggling that I'm doing with my hand, you can see like the plastic is pretty forgiving. So if you were worried, for example, I'm picking this figure up, this is what you're thinking for yourself. I'm picking this figure up, but I'm not planning to have this guy displayed all the time. And like you, humbled reviewer behind the camera, I'm probably going to be putting this guy back into a bag at some point. You don't have to worry as much that these icicles are going to break. They are pretty forgivable. But again, like the detailing on the figure's face, again, you got this tiny little nose. Imagine if this guy sneezed. I mean, that would just be a very destructive blizzard. Achoo! And literally just be wasting the wildlife in front of him. I mean, again, just even like looking at the branches, there's no way that that would be a realistic tree. Looking at the size of that and looking at the size of buildings, this got to be something that probably would have been growing out of his body. What I do like is all the more darker areas of stumps kind of within the ice. So it doesn't look like some of the stumps have developed, or in some cases it kind of looks like the branches or the trees have just snapped completely off. And then he holds one large one, which again, I can't even imagine how that would be sized at all with the buildings. It's one long basic stick that he carries around, almost as if he's ready to fight something. And judging by just the size of him alone, I can't even imagine what he would be fighting against. There is some posability, but really not much, though. The figure does have a swivel in his hand. It really does make no sense why they even gave him swivels in his hands anyways, because if he is going to be holding this, it's not like he can really rotate his hand because he's holding it really with both hands. The figure also as well has swivels in his legs. A swivel on his legs here as well. But the thing about it, though, is that he's always really going to be attached onto the display base. He really does require the display base similar to Santa Claus, because really without that, Jack Frost just doesn't have the proper means to stand properly. It doesn't really help that he has these rooted feet. The feet are flat here on the back, but you can see like the way that the roots actually jet out from the front for his toes. It doesn't make a very flat-footing figure, and it does, of course, result in him falling over. So Jack Frost will be a case where he always will need to have a display stand. He's not like Frosty. Frosty could really be a figure that could stand without the display stand. Jack Frost really does need it. And just attach it onto the back of the figure's feet like this. Even then, you really do have to kind of... I've done this a couple of times, even getting this guy first out and putting him out every Christmas time. I always have to kind of keep leveling off his feet because the display base that he has, I end up just kind of bringing the display base just a little bit lower down. It's a nice looking figure, though. It's certainly not my favorite. I mean, when I'm comparing it with already the top 3 figures that we've already had a look at, I did unfortunately I unwrapped the cooler presents first. I mean, looking already at Santa Claus, then we followed things up with Wolverine, my second favorite figure, Mrs. Claus, and then we looked at my favorite figure, Frosty the Snowman. I just sort of feel like Jack Frost comes up a little bit short. He's still better, I feel, than Rudy, the Rudolph, that we will be looking at in the upcoming review. And, of course, he's a little bit more interesting than Santa's little helpers, because, of course, those would kind of be figures I feel more accompanying Santa than anything else. He's my 4th favorite figure, just by the process of elimination, really already looking at my favorite figures, my top 3 figures from the Twisted Xmas. But at least, again, he does something a little bit different. Unlike, though, the other figures that would be scaled about the same size as a normal human being, Jack Frost, there's no way, I mean, judging again by the size of those buildings, there's no way that you could consider this guy to be a regular-sized character. He really should have also been a mega-sized figure, not to the scale of what he would be to these regular characters, but even if they had just found a way to make him a little bit bigger, even make him more menacing than he already is. I did make mention in the other Twisted Xmas figure reviews that the figures are now pretty expensive. Considering that they're already 17 years old, to find one still sealed, you're expecting to pay probably at least $100. Following to that, I actually, in fact, just between takes, I went on to eBay and I looked up Twisted Xmas Jack Frost. You can also do this as well for yourself. I saw 3 listings. One was for $98. Now that's 98 Canadian. So of course you're going to have to backtrack that a little bit to get it in the US dollars. One was for like $98. One was $103. And I think one was even for $124. That's sealed. Finding it loose, obviously it's going to be not as expensive, but the risks of always buying these figures loose is to ensure that, first of all, things aren't missing or things aren't broken. Jack Frost would be a very big culprit of having things missing, specifically those branches that he has sticking out from the top of his head. Any one of those, the longer ones could be broken, the slightly smaller ones could be missing altogether. So if you are looking to buy this guy loose, you want to really just make sure that all the things are intact with Jack Frost before you hit bid or before you hit buy it now. But what do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And based at least on what we've looked at so far with 4 figures, Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, Frosty the Snowman, and now Jack Frost, what would you say is your favorite figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you're still on board to see the rest of the Twisted Xmas, we are going to still be looking at Rudy the Rudolph. We're also going to be looking at the Santa's Little Helpers. So those 2 reviews will be coming your way. Making sure you're hitting the subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification helps to really ensure that you're always getting in the know whenever the new videos are being posted, as there's always a frequency of new videos. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, if you can believe it, 2 videos a day. So there's 10 videos a week always popping up on this channel. You don't want to be the person that's running down the street. I just missed out on his video. I just missed out on his video. Don't be the kid that's running down the street saying that. Be the kid that's actually watching the new content as it goes up. And of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.